My 1913 Bradshaw's Handbook to the Chief Cities of the World has brought me to Australia. I will ride some of the longest trains and the world's steepest railway. I'll climb blue mountains and cross red deserts. I'll swim above coral reefs and walk upon golden sands. As I journey across this spectacular continent, I'll discover the gold and silver, coal and wool on which this nation was built. I'll encounter her indigenous people and her national heroes, and discover the origins of the millions of immigrants who now call themselves Australians. I'm set to explore the coastline of northern Queensland, a state named after the British Empress Victoria. Bradshaw's remarks that it stretches to within 11 degrees of the equator, where Papua New Guinea is just 200 kilometres away. White settlers here battled against the humidity and cyclones, but were rewarded with fertile land that enjoys plentiful sun and rain. Even a century ago, tourists were amazed by the exoticism of the rainforest and the splendour of the Great Barrier Reef. My rail journey begins in the tropical rainforest village of Kuranda. From the popular holiday resort of Cairns, I travel south to beautiful Art Deco Innisfail, before heading to Ingham, where I hear how an Irish cattleman stood up for Indigenous people. I'll end in Townsville, gateway to the Great Barrier Reef. Along the way, I get my hands on the controls of the Sugarcane Express. The horn is a warning to Aussies. Hom at the controls. I sing along at the billabong. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And a new, non-aquatic creature is spotted off the reef. I've seen many of the wonders of nature before, but nothing, I think, that struck me with such a sense of magnificence. The Kuranda is described as a scenic railway, but when it was built in 1891, it wasn't with a view to being spectacular. If the engineers braved the hostile terrain and the appalling climate, it was because the railway was needed. And there is a danger that we look back now on enormous engineering feats and regard them as purely picturesque. Along its course, the track rises steeply. We pass through dense rainforests, beneath towering cliffs and tumultuous waterfalls. The scenery is magnificent. The train inches its way across the Stony Creek Bridge above the Stony Creek Falls. We are hundreds of feet here on steel pylons. This must have been one of the most difficult of all the engineering tasks in constructing the line. And now, having reached 300 meters in height, we have a superb view over the barren gorge and the ocean beyond. May I interrupt your viewing for a moment?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think?
Yeah, fantastic. Really enjoying it so far.
How far have you come to see this great wonder?
From
We're
Lincoln in England.
Yeah.
Oh, you're from England?
So quite a way, yeah.
And what expectations did you have of the trip today?
Yeah, I think it's surpassed the expectations, to be fair.
Oh,
But
definitely.
yeah, it's amazing, the views.
I mean, look now, look at what we're passing at this very minute. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, breathtaking.
The man in charge of operations is Robert McCartney. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Michael.
Great to see you. What a beautiful railway car. Tell me about that.
The carriages are all between 70 and 110 years old. The oldest one we got was built in 1909 at the Ipswich workshops down in Queensland.
And with air conditioning.
Yes, it's great when we get the nice breezes coming off the coast up the gorge.
Now, this scenic railway, for what purpose was it built?
The original purpose of building the railway was to get to the rich tin deposits up in Herberton, where they were doing the mining in the early 1880s.
Hostile terrain and difficult climate. Tell me about the building of the railway.
Well, the construction of this railway was an engineering marvel. They built the railway with their hands, with hand tools and dynamite. And they removed over 2 million cubic meters of earth and dirt. And engineers today say wouldn't consider building a railway here.
The rugged terrain posed enormous risks to the 1,500 Irish, Italian and Chinese workers who built this railway. So I'm afraid there must have been a big death toll.
Yes, unfortunately the construction of the railway took quite a big toll on human lives. Official inquest records showed 23 deaths, and the most of those deaths were attributed to explosions with dynamite. There was also a lot of skull fractures as a result of rockfalls and cave-ins, and people falling over the huge drops that we have, some falling over 200 metres into the barren gorge and dying as well.
The operators of the line were quick to spot its tourism potential. And as well as hauling goods, the railway brought sightseers to admire the landscape and to take the mountain air. What a wonderful station, historic railway architecture and an exuberant tropical garden. The beautifully preserved signal box is still manned by Station Master Glenn Curry. Hello, I'm Michael.
Oh, pleased to meet you, Michael. How are you today?
Superb signal box. And evidently it's not just for show, it's for real. You're pulling the levers.
Yes, this is a fully operational signal box.
But on the face of it, it seems extraordinary that you need 37 levers. Why so?
Well, I'll just explain them to you, Michael. See, the black levers control our points, so I can change from road to road. These blue levers lock the points into place. The red levers are for our signalling. And these white levers, well, they're just spares. They were originally put in when the signal cabin was built in case they expanded the yard.
Well, I bet an important man, the man who pulls the levers.
Yes. Pleased to meet you, Michael.
Bye-bye. The train has brought me to the wet tropics of Queensland, which stretch 450 kilometres along the coastline. Bradshaw says that the indigenous vegetation of the Australian colonies is peculiar, meaning particular. Of trees, the eucalypti and the acacias are the most common. In fact, here in the oldest continuously surviving rainforest in the world, there are over 1,000 species of tree. And some of them were not only here at the time of my guidebook, they date back 2,000 years. I'm meeting rainforest guide Warren Clinton on the Barron River. Warren.
Nice to meet you, Michael. Welcome aboard.
What a pleasure. So what do we mean by rainforest?
Well, to be classed as rainforest, we need certain types of things, and one of them, Michael, is rain. We need 1.5 metres of rain a year just to be classed as rainforest.
When the first tourists came here 100 years ago, they were rowed upriver, deep into the forest, to explore. Thank you.
Welcome to paradise.
Well, thank you very much.
So you see on our right here, Michael, is a perfect example of a rainforest tree.
What species is this?
This is a crowsfoot ash, and it's a very good example of a buttress root. You can see how this root spreads out over the forest floor to stabilise the tree.
Yeah.
And the early indigenous in here use it for communication. If they hit it, it has a beautiful low thud that reverberates all through the rainforest.
Mine is a different note.
Yeah.
We have a concerto here. Great. Traces of those early tours remain. Clearly we're on a man-made path here. What is the history of this?
Well, Michael, you'll notice these stones down here on our left-hand side. Well, these were put in here by Dan Duggan. We're at the start of his rainforest tour that started in about 1920, and he called it Paradise Rainforest Tour.
And I'm imagining that in those days they wouldn't come exactly dressed for the rainforest.
No, Michael, the gentlemen would have their full suits on and hats, and the ladies were dressed in the best attire of the day and long gowns and walking through here, and they'd walk through this forest all day like that.
So their interest was probably quite romantic.
Certainly was.
But when does the place begin to attract botanists, zoologists and so on?
Well, it was in 1901 they first discovered a primitive plant here in the wet tropics of North Queensland.
And what do we mean by primitive?
Well, these are the first flowering families of plants on Earth. They're called angiosperms. And they actually discovered 13 of these species here in the wet tropics, and there's only 19 on the whole planet.
I mean, that's why it's a World Heritage Site, I suppose. It really is
That's
of
one of the
global significance.
Yeah.
Tell me about the creepy crawlies in here.
We have some of the biggest snakes in Australia. We have the amethystine python or scrub python. We have two of the top 10 deadliest in the world. We have the taipan and the death adder in here.
Taipan I've heard of, very, very deadly, and the other one is in my guidebook from 100 years ago.
Right, the death adder. Now, they're a very small species, and they're very camouflaged in this leaf litter in the forest floor as well
Great.
during the
I
daytime.
won't even see my killer. Dan Duggan's Paradise Rainforest Tour came with refreshments included. And fortunately, for me too, the kettle has been boiled. Ah, welcome indeed, after our time in the rainforest. And so, the tourists who came here in the 1920s, this is how they would have been entertained.
They would have finished their tour with a nice cup of tea and cake.
It's easy to laugh at these Edwardians, but they were really the first tourists to show concern for the environment, weren't they?
They were some of the first tourists of this part of North Queensland, and they came here for this for the wellness air of the rainforest, and it's out.
We alternately skim the foliage as we go over the ridges and then fly high above the canopy as we pass the dips and the valleys. And you get this idea of all the vegetation that is fighting its way towards the daylight, and then the extent of the vast amount of rainforest. Thank you very much. Back on the ground, there are more wonders to behold. Here, the rainforest gives way abruptly and unexpectedly to bare rock, this is the site of the Barren Falls, which have set my imagination racing. Firstly, to grasp the scale, but I'm helped by those little dots around the top pool, which are human beings. And secondly, we've had a dry spell. I'm trying to envisage the falls after a cyclone. I imagine that the entire rock would be covered in torrents of water. Protection of the natural environment is a top priority for the nation. Indigenous rangers like Jeremy Richards have an instinctive feel for the land. You must have seen these falls in all conditions. What's it like when there's been a lot of rain?
Well, basically, yeah, you don't see any of the rocks, and it feels like, because there's that much mist coming off, yeah, you can actually wash your own face from all the water and the condensation there too.
It's an exciting place, isn't it?
Oh yeah, especially for me, being a traditional owner of the Jabbergai people, and this is one of our special places there too. It's actually a sacred site. We're sort of not allowed to be here at night. Yeah,
really?
That's one of our big laws, because if I do, I actually get haunted by my ancestors.
And when you come here during the day and you see this wonderful spectacle of nature, are you still thinking about that human history?
Yes, when I do come to a place like this, I actually do a welcome to country. And so for my language, which is the Jabbergai language, you say Yoramba Jabbaganji Bama. We, the Jabbergai people, Bong Banyora Garan, which means home you come, welcome. It also connects me to my ancestors as well, because this is home.
The best of Australia is experienced outdoors, including morning coffee. Cairns sits very prettily on the Pacific coast of North Queensland, framed by a ridge of mountains. And the palm trees here lining the beach remind us that this is in the tropics. But locals like to say that unlike some other tropical places in Australia, they do at least get 2 seasons here. It's not always sticky and hot. And certainly this morning has dawned cool and dry. – 165,000 people live in the Cairns region. Its laid-back atmosphere and tropical climate have made it a popular tourist destination. Built in the late 19th century for miners heading for the Hodgkinson River goldfield, it developed as a port and railhead. I'm continuing my journey south on the Spirit of Queensland. The North Coast line runs from here to Brisbane. Good to see you, thank you. What a lovely surprise. These seats are like business class on an intercontinental flight.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Queensland Rail welcomes those customers who've joined us today on board the Spirit of Queensland.
Queensland, says Bradshaw's, extends over 18 degrees of latitude. That's about the same as Aberdeen in Scotland to Marrakesh in Morocco, thus offering a range of climate equalled by few countries. The mean annual rainfall is up to 150 inches in the northern divisions of the state. With all that water and the accompanying wind, North Queenslanders have had to become accomplished in the art of rebuilding and redecoration. I'm alighting at Innisfail, from where I'll head to the fertile coastal plain. Thank you, Alistair. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Maize, barley, oats and rye are grown, says Bradshaw's. And sugar is a staple production in the coastal districts. Sugar cane, evidently, introduced to Australia by white settlers. It has become big business for Queensland, bringing to the state the sweet smell of success. John Edwards is in charge of production at the Tully sugar plantation. John, it seems that on all the flatland, for as far as you can see, there is sugar cane. What makes northern Queensland particularly suitable for the crop?
We don't have to do any irrigation at all. Here in Tully, we have one of the highest rainfalls in Queensland. We average 4.5 metres of rain a year.
The crop is notoriously hard work to harvest by hand. Why is that?
I guess as you can see, this cane that we're walking past here, there's lots of the dead leaves and that's what we call trash hanging off. That makes it very hard to get into the cane because it has to be cut off at ground level with the hand knives, the cane knives. And then this cane is very, very straight, but it can be quite bent and twisted depending on storms and size and things like that.
Sugar cane was brought to Australia in 1788 on the ships of the First Fleet, but it was over 70 years before the first viable cane plantation was established along Queensland's coast. From the 1860s until the turn of the 20th century, thousands of Pacific Islanders were brought in to harvest the crop, many illegally and against their will. It was back-breaking work, but today the process has been mechanised. How does the machinery compare with cutting it by hand?
I guess a harvesting group now, Michael, will probably be able to do around about 800 tonnes a day, whereas by hand a group of men would have maybe cut 2 or 3 or 4 tonnes in a day.
Phenomenal difference.
Yes. These are some of the tools we use, Michael, that would have been used in the early days of the cane industry. So you can see there, we call these cane knives. This one with the bent blade that was used so it was actually easy to get into the ground and cut off. This one here, you can actually see how much it has worn.
That's quite a sharp thing, isn't it?
It is a sharp thing, yes.
Which one would you recommend I try out?
We should probably try this one. I think it might be a little bit sharper than the older bent one.
Okay. Keep my own limbs out of the way, I guess. Hold on to the stick, give it a wallop at the bottom. Out it comes. And just take off the top.
Yep, take the top off. That'll stay in the field and that'll get sent to the factory to get processed.
And so this now is the sugar here, is it?
Would you like to try some of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Very fibrous, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Not as sweet as sugar. Maybe it needs to ripen a bit more and a little refinement.
Yes.
This story of sugar has given me quite a rush, but the fact that there's a sugar train is the icing on the cake. Thank you. Gentlemen, I'm Michael.
David.
David?
Fab.
Fab, what a name. What's that short for?
Fabricio.
Fabrizio. So, 36-ton locomotive, let's open her up. So our sugar train is underway, and I think we're about to pass some sugar wagons, are we, Fab?
Yep. Sugar wagons here in the loop.
So in the season, when all this is being cut, what do these wagons look like?
Full of cane.
Full of cane.
Yeah.
But I mean, tons and tons and tons of
Tons
stuff.
of it, yep.
And this is a narrow gauge line.
Yep. 2 foot.
2 foot gauge.
Yep.
How long have you been doing this, Fab?
34 years, I would say.
What's the job like? Is it very tough in the season?
It is very challenging, yeah. Because during the season, you've got to look out for harvesters, bin tractor drivers, farmers, and the general public.
You haven't squished anyone yet, I hope.
No, I haven't. I've been pretty close, but yeah, I haven't. You want to have a drive, Michael?
I'd love to. What are the controls?
Righto, that's your brake,
Yes.
that's your throttle,
Yes. So, should we take the brake off?
Take the brake off.
The horn is a warning to Aussies. Pom at the controls. There are, Fab. I really enjoyed that. Brilliant. The railway leads directly to the refinery, where the raw cane is processed. John, the plant's on a massive scale, and it has never struck me before how seasonal the business is. So really, until the crop has ripened in the field, you cannot do any crushing, and the factory is relatively quiet.
Yeah, it is relatively quiet now. We're in a maintenance and repair mode, having the plant available so when the cane is ready, we can operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
What does the crush achieve? What goes on in the crush?
So basically the first step of the crushing is to extract the juice out of the fibrous material. So that juice is then goes on to be processed. The fibrous material is then burnt in our boilers. So while we are operational, we are totally self-sufficient energy-wise.
And what's the scale of what you're doing here?
So in a normal day, we'll be crushing about 18,000 tonnes of cane in a day. And then from that, we will make about 2,000 or 2,200 tonnes of raw sugar every day.
Well, I shall never look at a packet of sugar again without remembering the immense scale of this operation.
Yeah,
amazing.
Sure.
Sugar has long been a staple here. The town was established by a sugarcane farmer in the 1880s. Today, Innisfail celebrates its wonderfully preserved Art Deco architecture and other period pieces. Good morning. Excuse me for disturbing you.
How are you?
You gentlemen look as if you have an appreciation of things which are vintage.
Yes, yes.
How do you feel about the architecture of the town?
Lovely. We all live here. Yeah,
You all live here?
appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
You're into Art Deco, are you?
Yep.
You're a man who likes colour yourself, I can see that.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, he looks a little bit like an Art Deco building. Yeah, he's got that style.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Have a good day. Hey, Ben!
Morning, Michael. Come up, please.
I've arranged to meet Councillor Ben Heath at the Johnston Shire Hall. Hello, Ben.
Good morning, Michael.
What a magnificent town full of Art Deco buildings. This is extraordinary. How did it come about?
Well, Innisfail as it stands today is the highest concentration of Art Deco buildings in the whole of Australia. How it come about? It was the 1918 cyclone, and there was 2 buildings that stood after the cyclone. And there was 2 reinforced concrete buildings, which is one building just behind us here and one on the corner. And they housed 600 people, and they survived. But throughout the cyclone, we lost 37 people, unfortunately.
The cyclone struck Innisfail on the 10th of March 1918. It remains the worst tropical storm ever to hit a populated area of Queensland. You're telling me then that every building in the town, bar 2, was destroyed?
Devastated. It was just horrendous, and we didn't know the cyclone was coming. The winds, they're talking between 150 mile to 180 mile per hour. Yeah, it was really tragic, and we had to rebuild, and there was this sense of how do we do it?
Forgive me, you're a small town, you're a very long way from Europe. How on earth did you decide to go the Art Deco route?
It was just the style of the time, and it was about the pride and moving forward and a sense of hope.
Nowhere embodies that spirit more than the Shire Hall, which has been rebuilt 4 times following the cyclone and 3 subsequent fires. Why did it matter so much to have a Shire Hall?
In the times, everyone liked to dance, but the consensus for Innisfail is that we didn't have a good hall. Everyone else had a great hall, but we didn't. So it was about that pride, and if we're going to do the architecture and get this right and build it, we had to have the best. The design work was one of the biggest projects in Queensland at the time. It was huge. And everyone back in the day, you drove the cars up and they danced. And that's what we used to do. And there used to be dance halls everywhere, but this was the premier event, was the Shire Hall.
In 2006, another powerful cyclone struck Queensland and devastated the town again.
the beachside towns that line the far north Queensland coast bore the brunt of Larry's fury. Frightened residents huddled indoors as winds up to 300 kilometres an hour tore through Innisfail, south of Cairns.
We had to look at the option of knocking the building down and starting again, or restoring what we've got here. Through the council at the time, they decided to restore it, but it cost it $17 million. Yeah.
Just around the corner from the Shire Hall, I'm drawn to a store with a European feel. Hello. What a beautiful delicatessen you have. It's superb.
Thank you.
Look at all these cheeses and sausages and hams. I'm guessing Italian, right?
Correct.
A lot of Italians came to Innisfail.
Correct. They did. Back in the early 1920s, mainly, Len, weren't they?
Hello.
Yes. This is my husband, Lee.
Oh, good to see you. And you're Anita, I'm guessing by your shirt.
Yes.
In the town today, are you still quite cosmopolitan by origin?
Yes, we are. Definitely.
Apart from Italians, what have you got?
We've got Greeks, Maltese, English, Yugoslav, German. It's actually very multicultural.
I'm thinking then that it's not impossible that you could offer me a cappuccino.
There you go, Michael.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
An excellent cappuccino. And it's nice to see a town which is as lively as it is colourful. In Australia, the hinterland is never far away, and it teems with exotic plants and challenging wildlife. Bradshaw's mentions the diamond snake, the clack snake, the brown snake, and the death adder, and goes on to comment, there are no dangerous animals other than snakes in Australia. What? What about the venomous spiders, and in the waters, the sharks and the stingray? And even Bradshaw's remembers to mention that crocodiles are found in the north. Nothing dangerous about crocodiles. Hello, Vince.
Hello, Michael.
Good to see you.
Yes, welcome on board the Snapping Tours.
I'm looking forward to seeing some wildlife.
Well, I hope so. We hope we see some crocodiles, we might see stingrays. You never know what we see.
Vince Gangaby will be my guide to what lurks beneath these apparently calm waters. You always have to ask in Australia, I think, is it saltwater crocs or freshwater crocs that we're looking for?
And all the ones that we see down here today will be saltwater crocodiles, and they grow to 29 feet, 6 metres, 7 metres, 8 metres long, and they're very aggressive compared to the freshwater crocodiles. So if a freshwater crocodile would come down here, a saltwater crocodile will eat it, most likely, because they are territorial, and they don't like anything in their space, especially freshwater crocodiles. Here you go, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Let's see what we can find.
Aboriginal people hunted crocodiles for their meat for thousands of years with little impact on their numbers. The high commercial value of skins and the ready availability of rifles after the Second World War changed all that. Crocodile populations plunged until North Queensland introduced a law in 1974 to protect wild crocodiles.
They might be on the edge or actually sitting on the banks.
Is that one?
No, unfortunately, Michael. That's a lot of people get to see what they think it's a crocodile, but we call it a logodile.
That's a log.
There's one in the trees there. I can see his eye now, Michael. You'll be able to see in a second. Did you see the flash of eye?
I didn't see it. You saw it.
Oh, yeah.
And it was in here somewhere, wasn't it?
It was in here, it was, yeah.
Good effort, Vince.
Cheers, Michael.
Thank you.
Beautiful sunset, isn't it?
Hello. What do you say? Today I set off from Innisfail to continue my journey by rail to the town of Ingham, and from there to my last stop, Townsville. I'll then go on by boat to the Great Barrier Reef. My guidebook, written more than 100 years ago, says with the continued advance of settlement, the Aboriginal numbers have shrunk. In the more densely populated states, they are practically negligible. At the census of 1911, the number of full-blooded Aborigines living in proximity to whites was only about 20,000. The moment when white settlers first encountered the indigenous population is known as first contact, a turn of phrase that disguises a series of atrocities with which Australia still struggles to come to terms.
Thank you.
I leave the train at Ingham, on my way to Mungalla Station, an 807-hectare estate set amid the coastal wetlands of the Herbert River Valley. My host is Jacob Cassidy. Hello, Jacob. I'm Michael.
Michael, how are you?
Good to see you. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Michael.
Good to see you. So what's going on here?
Michael, this is what we call a Cut Murray underground feast that has been cooking for about 4 hours. And you're just in time to give us a hand to pull it out.
This is very warm.
Yeah. Very warm.
And this is a traditional way of cooking?
You know, our people have cooked like this for thousands of years.
Maybe I can give you a hand?
Absolutely.
May I?
Grab you a shovel?
This is like a sort of treasure hunt, isn't it? For me, I have no idea what's underneath.
You start to see the steam give you an indication of actually how hot it is.
Yeah, it's getting hotter and
Very
hotter.
hot.
You certainly wrapped it up well. And after all that, we come to some leaves.
Banana leaves.
Banana leaves. So layer after layer, I was beginning to think there'd be nothing there at all. I was beginning to think it was all a joke.
Nothing.
No. Well, what a feast. All we need now is the 5,000 to feed.
And it starts to get a bit warm too, I must warn you.
It certainly does. Can't tell you how wonderful the aroma is from this piece of meat. What do you think I've got here, Jacob?
That looks like pork. This is lamb.
Oh, isn't that nice?
A bit of rosemary on there.
Yes, yes, yes. Looks like you know what you're doing, but I suppose after a few thousand years you get the hang of it.
Well, we've got some good cooks here.
What a feast.
Yes.
That does look very, very good. Tell me about this place today. What is this place?
Well, this is Mungalla Station. It's a Aboriginal-owned and operated working cattle property. We do tourism here, conservation land management, and I guess one of the most important things is that we provide education and training for Indigenous people.
And what's the history of the station?
An Irishman settled here in 1882, and the pioneering history is extraordinary in terms of what that first pioneer did, looking after, I guess, and advocating for Aboriginal people.
Who was it?
He came out of County Antrim during the potato famine. His name was James Cassidy, and eventually ended up here in 1882, and this is where he stayed until he died.
If I've got this right, your name is Cassidy.
That's right.
Is that a coincidence?
There's people all over Australia, Aboriginal people, that have taken on the name of the station owners because they didn't have second names.
So, what is called first contact between Aboriginal people and the white settlers? How would you describe those times and those events?
For Aboriginal people, it wasn't a really good time, especially up here in North Queensland, where the colony of Queensland were issuing, I think it was 100-year leases on country, which meant early pioneers could come up here and select parcels of country that they want to lease. And the fact that Aboriginal people have been living there for thousands of years and had their own laws and systems in place didn't really matter. And that's when conflict really started, especially up here in the north. And I guess all over Australia.
I mean, you You speak very gently of it. You say that it wasn't good. I mean, it was actually a catastrophe, wasn't it?
For Aboriginal people, it was horrific. The brutality in which Aboriginal people were dispossessed. I mean, there's horror stories all over Australia, and there's horror stories that haven't been told. Throughout that part of our history, they used the term disperse, which could describe anything from just moving Aboriginal people on to wholesale slaughter of men, women and children.
And into this murderous environment comes this white Irishman, James Cassidy.
Mate, that's one of the really good stories about this place, and I guess it's very unusual for a white pioneer to actually advocate for Indigenous people, to allow Aboriginal people to camp in their historical country, their traditional country. You know, he wrote letters complaining about the treatment of Aboriginal people, which I find to be an amazing story, because that just wasn't done at the time.
Do you think Australia has faced up to these matters?
You know, there'll always be conversations around colonisation and the effect it had on Aboriginal people. One thing I really maintain is that no matter what we do, we cannot change what happened in the past. It's only together that we can change what happens in the future. I like the idea that we can take charge of our own destiny. I like the idea that we can be on a level playing field in terms of business and enterprise development, and empowering our younger people with the proper education and training that's going to sustain employment outcomes. I'm really supportive of.
While Jacob looks to the future, he keeps up the skills of the past. What were boomerangs actually used for?
For hunting.
So what was the point? What was the point of it coming back?
Point of it is, if you're hunting birds on that side of the creek, if you miss them, they'll come back on this side of the creek. The less you stay at the creeks around North Queensland, the better.
Quite right. I found that out already.
If you do like a 45-degree angle, bringing them back behind you, and depending on the wind, the idea is to come back around and hit the ball.
It's not as easy as Jacob makes it look. Oh,
that is better.
Whoa.
Very good, Mark.
My boomerang won't come back.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. Do you happen to serve beer?
Nice cold beer, everybody.
Yes, please.
Right, coming up.
Thank you. Beautiful place. Hi, I'm Michael. That's amazing. You've got 3 little Joeys.
Yep, these are Joe wallabies.
Oh, they're wallabies, are they? And what's the story? Why are they here with you?
Most of them come into care due to roadkill, then they're orphans, so I look after them.
And how long will you look after them for?
Up to 12 months.
And then what?
And then I release them back into the wild.
Well, they're very, very sweet. I hope they'll have a long life back in the wild one day.
They certainly will.
How's it going?
Yeah,
Good evening, madam. Now, bit of a sing-song, I think. Take it away, Keith.
Take it away. Okay, waltzing the Tilda.
Yeah!
Can buy a billabong.
Under the shade of a coolibah tree, and he sang as he washed and waited till his billy boiled. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me.
and his ghost may be heard as you pass by the Billabong. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me.
Bravo! Bravo! Last stop on this service is Townsville, which the guidebook tells me is the chief port of North Queensland and founded by a merchant called Robert Towns. But since ville is the French for town, you could be forgiven for thinking that it was so good they named it twice. Only in Australia. For the tourist, Townsville is a gateway to the coast and the Great Barrier Reef. David.
Good morning, Michael.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
I'm looking forward to this.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much. My guide is Dr. David Wackenfeld, Chief Scientist for the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. We're taking a boat to Keeper Reef, a dive site about 40 miles off Townsville. Racing across the Pacific Ocean at 17 knots towards the Great Barrier Reef. It's amazing where a railway journey will take you. The Great Barrier Reef is the only living thing on Earth which is visible from space. It stretches 1,400 miles along Australia's northeastern coastline. Actually, it's not one, but 3,000 separate reefs. It was a choppy voyage out to the reef, but we've arrived at our destination. We're now sheltering in its lee. And this is the point where the boat must be secured, and a member of the ship's crew has swum out to secure an anchor for the bow and for the stern. What is coral?
Coral is an amazing animal. At one level, it's incredibly simple. Biologically, it's very similar to a jellyfish, but there's one big difference. It makes a skeleton out of limestone, and it's that limestone skeleton with millions of corals over thousands of years that has built the enormous structure of the Great Barrier Reef that you can see from space.
The reef is as large as Germany, and through fisheries and tourism, generates about 6 billion Australian dollars a year. 100 years ago, its importance was only beginning to be understood. My guidebook of 1913 is fairly peremptory about the Great Barrier Reef. What did they know about it more than 100 years ago?
In 1890, Queensland hired its first ever fisheries inspector, and that was a gentleman by the name of William Saville Kent. In his spare time, he was studying the corals of the Great Barrier Reef and was really the first scientist to study the Great Barrier Reef in a modern scientific way.
Saville Kent was a pioneer of the scientific management of fisheries. His research, and in particular his photographs of the corals, were published to great acclaim in the 1890s. Today, more than 2 million people visit the reef each year to experience these marvels at first hand. And so the moment has come to sample the wonders and to brave the horrors of the Australian deep. Fish, Bradshaws observes, are numerous in the seas around the Australian colonies, which is as wonderfully, eye-poppingly true now as it was then. The reef is a World Heritage Site. It's one of the richest and most complex natural ecosystems on Earth, and home to 1,500 species of fish and 400 species of coral. And it's stunning. A truly memorable event for me, and not only because I can hardly swim. I was introduced to a new world, a giant structure created by tiny animals stretching for the size of a major country, a thing of intense beauty. I've seen many of the wonders of nature before, but nothing, I think, that struck me with such a sense of magnificence. But global warming now threatens the reef. Rising sea temperatures have encouraged the spread of a creature which is destroying it. Dr. Matthew Dunn-Babin is leading the fight back. Matthew, hi.
Hi, Michael.
Good to see you. So, what is the particular threat to the coral that you're working on?
Particular threat is the crown of thorn starfish. Now, these are starfish that literally eat coral. It's very spiny, obviously. They're actually poisonous, but underneath they have a mouth that will just chew away at the coral and basically kill it.
A single crown of thorns starfish can consume 13 square meters of reef in a year, and each female can lay 60 million eggs in one spawning season. In the face of such overwhelming figures, Matthew's team has turned to robots. So what is the aim? Is it actually to kill them or to control their reproduction?
In this particular case, we don't have a means of controlling their reproduction, so we're looking at killing them. This is our second generation of our underwater robots. It's called RangerBot, and it is quite sophisticated in that it only uses robotic vision to navigate, so that's know where it is, obstacle avoidance, but also to detect crown of thorn starfish. When it does that, it will actually deliver an injection of bile salts, which is the agent that is currently used to kill them.
How does it recognise crown of thorn starfish?
Well, we've basically trained it the same way that you would read a book, looking at photos. We've actually presented hundreds of thousands of photos to this vehicle, and it has created its own model of what a starfish looks like, and it's very accurate at detecting them in the wild.
The plan now is to recruit a citizens' army to deploy thousands of ranger robots in the war against the crown of thorns.
Okay, so we're just driving it now manually, but when I press play, it will execute that mission that we just described.
So the robot has been programmed, it will follow a certain course and then start to look for the starfish and intercept and kill.
Precisely.
It's quite James Bondian, isn't it, really?
It is.
Townsville seems small enough and provincial enough, but in the world of marine biology, this is a hub. And Townsville is to the understanding of coral what Silicon Valley is to the world of information technology. I've come to meet Dr. Lena Bay for a guided tour of the Marine Simulator, or CSIM as it's known. What a spectacular sight. A laboratory in full flow.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It's absolutely wonderful. When I see all these shapes, all these wonderful forms and all these colours, what am I actually looking at?
Lots of people are really surprised to hear that corals are in fact animals.
Yes.
And what you're seeing is about 40 or 50 different species of corals in this tank alone.
The latest work here attempts to chart the effects of global warming on the coral reef.
And in the background there, you can see a tank that's kept under current conditions, so what we're seeing on the reef now.
Yes.
And here's a tank that's kept at 2 degrees warmer than what the reef is.
So what I'm seeing straight away is that one is highly populated. This one is half empty. That one has lots of corals that are growing up almost like plant life. Well, all those specimens look pretty good. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So what you can see over in that tank is that we've got 2 species of coral. We've got a branching coral, and then we have the brain coral, gets its name for obvious reasons. And those 2 species are happy under ambient or current day conditions. But in this tank, we've lost all the branching corals. So they are quite sensitive, and they just haven't been able to persist under these conditions.
And the brain corals?
What you can see here is something that is quite astonishing. Corals are in fact individuals, same as people, and some individuals are more tolerant than others. So if you look at this guy here, it's very happy and healthy, it's grown a lot, and it's got the algae in its tissue and the bright green colour. But in contrast, here's another individual of the same species, and you can see that it's completely bleached. This variation is the fuel for natural selection.
Is there a thought then that if you discover that some are genetically better programmed to survive in warm water, that you could seed the reef with those species?
Well, that's one of the ideas that's on the table at the moment. What we're doing is we're doing the basic science to understand whether we can actually capture and harness corals' natural ability to respond to the environment and use that for conservation into the future.
Well, congratulations, and obviously I wish you the very best with your work.
Thank you.
Tropical Queensland displays the bounties of nature. Whilst its cyclones wreak havoc, its lush fields yield abundant crops, and its rainforest houses a cornucopia of plant and animal life. Recently, Australians have come to talk of stewardship, recognising that the Indigenous people were the custodian of this country's lands for millennia. In the same vein, humanity is now accepting guardianship of the planet, including the delicate and irreplaceable marvels like the Great Barrier Reef. Next time, I'll mingle with marsupials. Hello, Grant.
You enjoying that? Oh, you're a good boy.
Which one of us?
Both of you.
I'll ride the world's greenest train. For the first time ever, my tracks are solar powered. And tackle training with an Aussie rugby legend.
Nice work. Very fierce.
To South America next on BBC Two for one of the biggest events on their footballing calendar, their equivalent to the Champions League final in Match of the Day Live, coming up.